In 1879, a 16-year-old boy left his father's farm and headed to Detroit. At the time, trains and horse carriages were the primary modes of transportation, and automobiles were seen as a luxury only accessible to the wealthy. However, this young man had bigger aspirations. Just 35 years after his arrival in Detroit, he opened a car company that would revolutionize the automobile industry. His name was Henry Ford, and his company's cars soon dominated the market. Half of all cars in his world bore his name, and he went on to become one of the wealthiest men in American history at his time. This is the story of Henry Ford and how his invention of mass production immortalized him. Henry Ford was born on July 30th, 1863, on his farmer's farm in what is now Dearborn, Michigan. His father, William Ford, owned a farm where the entire family lived and worked. Being the eldest of 6 children, Henry was expected to take over the family business, but he had no interest in farming and found it to be a laborious and unappealing task. Despite his best efforts to help on the farm, he had no love for it and only cherished the memories of his mother, Mary Ford. In his youth, Henry was not fond of school and only completed 8th grade. Instead, he preferred to learn through self-discovery and was fascinated by mechanics from a young age. When he was 12, his father gave him a pocket watch, which he quickly learned to disassemble and reassemble. This newfound talent led to a reputation as a watch repairman, and he began fixing watches for others in the neighborhood. Henry's passion for mechanics intensified when he saw a steam engine for the first time at the age of 13 during a school trip to one of Detroit's companies. Over the next few years, he became obsessed with this new hobby, and by the age of 15, had constructed his own steam engine. However, Henry's life took a turn when he lost his mother to illness. He was deeply bonded with her, and her loss made him detest the farm even more. At the age of 16, against his father's wishes, Henry left the village in search of a new direction in life and to escape the painful memories associated with the farm. At the time, Detroit was rapidly transforming into an industrial city thanks to the advent of the steam engine, and there was a high demand for young engineers. It was in Detroit where Henry reinvented himself by immersing himself in the study of machines. He took a job at the Michigan Car Company Works, a streetcar manufacturing company, but was unfortunately fired just 6 days later. After a period of unemployment, Henry found work as an apprentice at James Flower & Brothers Machine Shop, earning $2.60 per week. However, this income was not enough to cover his rent, so he took on a night job as a jeweler, cleaning and repairing watches, working 6 hours a night, 6 days a week for $3 weekly. Despite the demands of his multiple jobs, Henry still found time to study and experiment with machines. In 1882, at the age of 19, Henry returned to Michigan. Although he still detested farming, he made good use of his childhood obsession and spent most of his time playing with the machines on his father's farm, including a portable steam engine. Henry's talent and expertise with machines quickly spread across Michigan and caught the attention of the district representative of the Westinghouse Engine Company of Schenectady, New York, who eventually hired him. Henry's job was to travel throughout southern Michigan to set up and service Westinghouse steam tractor engines. In 1885, Henry met Clara Jane Bryant at a New Year's Eve party and became engaged the following year. As a wedding gift, Henry's father gave him 40 acres of land, but instead of turning it into farmland, Henry had other plans. In 1891, Henry and Clara moved to a small apartment in Detroit. Around this time, Henry came across a British magazine and discovered the gas engine, which was being produced in limited quantities by German engineer Nicholas Otto. This engine was much more efficient than steam engines, as it didn't require 30 minutes to start up. The engine accomplished all its combustion internally. Although the gas engine was gaining popularity in Europe, few in America had heard of it. However, Henry was lucky enough to find someone in Detroit who owned one, and he was immediately captivated. Despite not understanding how the engine worked, Henry was determined to learn more and applied for a job as a night engineer for the Edison Illuminating Company, earning $40 a month. As the biggest electric company in Detroit, it generated electricity for 1,000 homes using a steam engine, making Henry well qualified for the position. As a chief engineer, Henry had ample time to study electricity when the engine was running smoothly. In 1893, Henry and Clara welcomed their only child, Edsel Bryant Ford, and 3 months later, Henry was promoted to chief engineer, earning $100 per week. That same year, he succeeded in creating his first working gas engine, a crucial step towards his dream of creating a horseless carriage. On June 4, 1896, he completed his experimental car called the quadricycle, which was powered by a gasoline engine. The car was essentially two bicycles placed side by side, and while it was successful, it had some issues, such as only having 2 gears and no cooling system. Henry made several adjustments to the car, including adding a cooling system, and eventually sold it for $200, using the money for another project. With the support of the Detroit mayor, Henry started to construct his second experimental vehicle in 1899 and completed it by July. This new car was bigger, sturdier, and heavier than the previous one. One day, Henry took a wealthy lumber merchant named William Murphy for a test drive in the new car. By the end of the drive, William was eager to join Henry's business venture, and on August 5, 1899, the Detroit Automobile Company was formed. However, the company failed just a year later due to several reasons, such as Henry's innovative ideas for improving the car not aligning with the stakeholders' vision for passenger cars, and the production delays caused by the use of parts from multiple companies. As a result of these issues, Henry was fired from his position, but he remained optimistic, taking his dismissal as a chance to start again more intelligently. Henry then decided to focus on racing cars, which had become a popular sport in the United States, as a platform to showcase his vehicles and their quality. A year later, Ford's newly designed racing car defeated the vehicles of Cleveland automaker Alexander Winton. Henry's 26 horsepower car became the talk of the town, giving investors the confidence they needed to support him once again. This led to the formation of the Ford Motor Company, with Henry as the chief engineer. However, Henry's continued focus on racing cars frustrated his investors, who wanted him to create passenger cars, leading them to bring in Henry Martin Leland to do their bidding. Annoyed by this, Henry resigned, saying, "I resign, determined never again to put myself under orders." Leland, on the other hand, followed the wishes of the investors and went on to create what is now known as Cadillac. With Henry Ford gone, the company was renamed the Cadillac Motor Company. Henry, along with his former racing cyclist named Tom Cooper, continued to build racing cars, and in 1902, they produced the Ford 999, driven by Barney Oldfield, who had never driven an automobile before, surpassing Winton's car once again. By 1904, Henry's new car set all-American records by reaching a top speed of 91.4 miles per hour. With these records and victories, Henry established himself as the best American designer for racing cars, and he knew that whenever he was ready, investors would back him again for his third company. Henry Ford, with the support of 11 investors and financial backing from Alexander Young Malcolmson, a wealthy dealer from Detroit, established his third company, initially named Ford and Malcolmson Limited in 1902. However, after 2 failed attempts, he was determined not to fail again and decided to focus on creating an affordable vehicle for the common man, as at the time, owning a car was considered a luxury for the wealthy. With his visionary approach and a knack for attracting top talent, Henry made over 20 design prototypes before finally settling on one, which he called the Model A. Over the next 5 years, he continued to improve the Model A, followed by the Model N. However, what really changed during this time was not just the design of the cars, but the way they were made. Henry learned from his previous failures the importance of having a single manufacturer responsible for supplying the parts he needed to build his cars, and so he found a machine shop in Detroit to do just that. During a trip to Chicago, Henry was inspired by the assembly line concept he saw in a slaughterhouse, and realized that if he could incorporate the same idea into car manufacturing, he could produce more cars in a day. He raised more money and built his own factory in 1904, employing over 300 workers and experimenting with the assembly line process. By 1906, the Model N was the first car to use the assembly line, which increased production by 5 times and made it the best-selling car in the US. In 1905, Henry built his own manufacturing company to produce his own engines, transmissions, and other components for car production. And around this time, he discovered vanadium steel, which was 3 times stronger and lighter than previous steel. He used this new steel in the Model T, one of the most successful cars in history. Henry's dream was to make automobiles for everyday use by the common man, and the Model T was the answer to that dream. Despite its high initial cost of $150, which is around $21,000 in today's currency, it became a fan favorite, with 15,000 orders placed soon after its release. The Ford Motor Company soon became the #1 car company in America. In 1910, Henry built a new plant in Highland Park, Michigan to keep up with the increasing demand for the Model T. By 1913, the assembly line was officially in working order, and production time was reduced from 12 hours to 90 minutes. In 1914, the Ford Motor Company had produced over 300,000 vehicles, more than all other car manufacturers combined. The number of Model Ts produced increased every year, and Henry reduced the car's price accordingly. By 1916, the price of the Model T, which once sold for $850, was now selling for less than $400. To combat high turnover among workers who found the assembly line boring, Henry doubled their wages to $5 a day, attracting mechanics from all over the country to work for him. He also introduced a change in the number of working hours, giving mechanics an hour off and creating a 24-hour operation. This move was met with skepticism from other car companies, but it was a success and set a new standard in the automobile industry. Currently, Ford Motor Company holds a market capitalization of around $70 billion and continues to be a significant player in the automotive industry.